Good morning and welcome to Drew's Book Reviews. So today we are doing part 3 of my Maps in a Mirror series. So this is part 3, Fables and Fantasies. So the first story in this section is titled Unaccompanied Sonata. So basically this is a story about a man who has a talent for singing. He is a maker and he has the ability to create the most astounding and most beautiful music you could imagine, but to do so he must be isolated from all other influence in order for it to be truly pure music. And he breaks this law by listening to other music, which in the end influences his music. And he is banned from listening to or creating music as a result, but he goes throughout his life and he just cannot adhere to this ban on music. So he still continues to create, and as he creates music, he begins to lose parts of himself, his hands, his voice, his uh, ears, his senses, essentially, those which he uses to create the music. So, kind of an interesting concept, and the fact that everything is controlled. And what would you do if you were banned from doing that which you love? And can you really do that? Can you really stop doing those things that you love? And the creator of this music and the effects and the ripple of this art and the impact it has on so many people continues to spread despite the government's best effort to stop his creation uh, in the end. So that's definitely an interesting take or an interesting story on controlling the minds and creativity of others. So the next story in this section is titled A Cross-Country Trip to Kill Richard Nixon. Now this is a pretty basic story. It's essentially just plays as a commentary on just how much America hated Richard Nixon when he was in power. Um, Beyond that, there's not much more to say other than the idea that everybody hates Richard Nixon and they've got to go and kill the guy. And that's pretty much the bulk of the story. Like, there's not a lot to say about this particular story. Um, so not a lot of depth to it. Just we all hate Richard Nixon, and the guy goes on a cross-country trip to kill him. Now, the Porcelain Salamander. So this is basic fairy tale story. There's this princess who is cursed, and this porcelain salamander, which magically makes her all better in the end. But she has to give up something that she loves, which is this porcelain salamander, in order to be made whole and pure once again. So it's pretty common theme throughout literature in that to overcome the challenges that we have to sometimes make sacrifices and give up those things which we love. This is very much set in a fairy tale type setting, so it really has that fairy tale elements to it. The Middle Woman. So this one is basically the idea behind this one is a story about a dragon who grants 3 wishes to the middle woman. So middle, basically meaning middle class, very typical person. They're not really poor, they're not really rich, they're just average. And this dragon grants her 3 wishes, but she doesn't actually use all 3 wishes. She only ever uses 2 wishes of her 3. So the basic concept being, what happens to the one who grants the wishes if all the wishes are not used? So in the end, she finally asks for her 3rd wish, which is to make this dragon happy for the rest of his days. And overall, just a different, unique take on the whole idea of magical creature granting somebody 3 wishes. Most people would write about 3 wishes that the person makes. This time, it's what happens to to the one granting the wishes when the one receiving them doesn't use them all. Then we have the bully and the beast. So this is a very typical knight has to slay the dragon fairy tale type story. You've got the princess that the knight wants to marry, and you've got the knight who must slay the dragon to receive her hand in marriage. So that's basically the gist of the story itself. It's about this knight who goes out to slay the dragon. And he's the only one that ever admits that he is in fact afraid of this dragon. And very typical fairy tale type story. You don't have to say pretty much the same thing about the princess and the bear, which is the one immediately following this. It's just, again, magical creature. This time it happens to be a bear. And the princess and their relationship in a very fairy tale like story play out. So these are basically all just fairy tales, which I guess kind of works with the title of this section of the book anyway. But overall, those ones particularly not that great. I didn't find them to be all that good. I mean, they're not horrible. Specifically, the Bully and the Beast and the Princess and the Bear, very much too fairy tale-ish for me. But then we move on to Sand Magic. Now, Sand Magic, that is a very interesting one. It's the story about this guy that goes off to learn magic, and we learn within the story that there are different types of magic. There's earth magic and water magic and tree magic, and basically the idea is that you obtain magical ability through serving these different elements and reality of existence and the physical elements of the earth, with stories about a boy who's lost everything and he wishes to learn the magic that would give him the power to avenge his family and his losses. And that is the sand magic, which is the magic of the desert. So he must serve the desert. The desert serves death because it's so difficult to survive in the desert. And the desert is harsh and not very accommodating to life. And so, in order to serve the desert, he must service death. He must basically become a man completely destroyed with his own quest for vengeance, that he ends up bringing death and destruction everywhere he goes. And only then can he obtain the power necessary through sand magic, which destroys him in the end. So that's just a fantastic, probably the best story in this section of the book, I think. Really liked it. Probably my favorite story within this book here. And then there's The Best Day. It's kind of a be careful what you wish for type story. Or the story of this woman who wanted to, basically she wanted every day to be her best day ever, and her wish is granted. But the curse being that she spent the rest of her life reliving the best day of her life over and over and over again. So while the world went on around her, she just kept reliving the same day over and over and over again. So it's kind of one of those things where you got to be careful what you wish for, because you never know what's going to happen. And sometimes what you wish for can turn into a curse. And A Plague of Butterflies. This one is an interesting one where this guy just wakes up one day to have his house and everything about him completely and totally covered with butterflies, who then proceed to follow him on this, essentially this journey of life to this hidden city where he basically comes to recognize what everything's about. So it's essentially this journey. Other than that, though, I don't really have a lot to say about A Plague of Butterflies. Honestly, I didn't think it was as good as some of the other stories within this book. Like, it just wasn't as good as Sand Magic, in my opinion. But hey, it's still definitely kind of interesting read. And then we have The Monkeys Thought 'Twas All in Fun. Now, this is kind of more of a science fiction type story. It's kind of an odd one in that this mysterious object appears in the solar system, and within this object are hundreds of self-sustaining habitats, and an overpopulated Earth must find a way to move people from Earth to this strange, mysterious, perfectly designed habitat. But this object is actually a living, breathing, space living alien creature, and each of the individual habitats kind of act like an individual cell within the creature itself, and kind of interconnected from the creature's consciousness. So we hear it telling itself tales and stories of the people who lived there and visited there, and kind of telling its own story as the creature grows up and evolves. And that interplay between the humans visiting it and living there, and how those stories of those people process through the mind of this alien creature. So it's really, really quite an interesting story, actually. Between that and Sand Magic, I'd say probably the two most interesting and best of the short stories in this section. I really enjoyed them. I'm sure that you will as well if you pick this up and give it a read. I mean, overall, I really like this part of the book, and overall, I'm enjoying the book. So definitely, you want to make sure that you do stay tuned. So, of course, there is more to come. Because next up, we're going to have Book 4, Cruel Miracles, Tales of Death, Hope, and Holiness. So, of course, as always, don't forget to stay tuned, check it out, and I hope that you enjoyed this review. So stay tuned for the next segment of this series of Maps in a Mirror. And thank you for watching, and as always, don't forget to comment and subscribe below. Do thank you very much, and you have yourself a great day.